really special segment of Resident Skeptics. I know we talk a lot on the national level, but there are things on the local level that really matter. And we have people that are doing it right here in our community. And one person is Brooke Weiss with Moms for Liberty here in North Carolina for the Mecklenburg chapter. We're excited to get to talk to her about this. It's a real treat for us because we're not in the school system. We don't have children. Well, we have dogs, but that's not the same. It is not the same. You can't be a pet parent. Anyway, we don't have kids in the school system. We hear about what's going on through the media, but the media tries to squash it. So we're really excited to talk to Brooke about this. Brooke, thank you so much for being here. Just kind of take us through a little bit about what you guys are doing in this chapter.
Sure, thank you so much for having me. First, let me say that whether you have children in the school system or not, I always like to tell people that you have a stake, because everyone should care about what happens in the public schooling system, because those children are your fellow citizens. And hopefully they'll graduate someday, they're gonna be your coworkers, they're gonna be your neighbors. And so really everybody should care what happens. Not to mention 40% of your tax dollars go to education. So
that is absolutely insane. I feel like it's awkward I'm like this, but it's okay. We're gonna make it work with the one mic. Oh, Connor is coming in clutch here. So we know that there's some stuff that's going on in the school system. There are some people that say, oh, that's just a one-off case. That doesn't really happen. Can you kind of tell us about some of the materials that you're seeing pushed in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system?
Sure. Moms for Liberty has 285 chapters in 44 states now. And for every one of our chapters, it's the same. And so what we try to do is to show parents and to show people what is going on in schools by providing evidence and examples in their communities. Because you're right, most parents are totally unaware, and if they are aware, then they think that it's happening in places like San Francisco or Portland or New York, and they don't think that it's happening in their communities. So some of the things that I've been able to do in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system, I filed a public records request to get a hold of the gender support plan. And I have that on our website. I usually walk around with a binder that a copy of the document is in there. And it's very easy to tell when you look at this actual CMS document that they will exclude parents. So you can have a kindergartner that shows up and tells their teacher they want to go by a different name and use different pronouns, and they will not tell the parents. So they will begin to socially transition your child, meaning that your child is maintaining one identity at school and then a totally, real identity at home. And how confusing can that be?
So, and this is lined out in this plan. You said it's on your website, that parents can go look at this. This is happening in Charlotte, North Carolina.
This is happening in Charlotte, North Carolina. You can go to momsforliberty.org, and there's a map on our homepage of the United States, and if you click on North Carolina, you'll see we have 18 chapters right now in the state of North Carolina, and if you click on Mecklenburg, brings you to my website, and if you scroll down to useful links, useful resources, I have a copy of a link to a PDF file of the gender support plan. And lots of other useful information. So that's one example of things that are happening. I've also got several examples that have been confirmed by the superintendent of books that are sexually explicit. My daughter in 9th grade was assigned a book called The Girl That Fell from the Sky, and there was a sexually explicit rape scene in that book, and so I objected to my daughter reading that book. I didn't think that it was appropriate. Personally, I believe that there's no place for sexualization in schools. I don't really care what grade it is. But the point is that we believe parents have a fundamental right to raise their children according to their own values. Fundamental meaning God-given. The government doesn't give us that right. God gives us that right. And so that includes directing your child's education. And so I should be the one that makes a decision whether my child reads a book like that. And there are many other examples of sexually explicit material in schools. Go ahead.
I was going to just quickly interrupt you and ask now. I'm just going to push, just going to do a little baby push just for anyone. Okay, It's like, okay, well, 9th grade is high school. Oh, that's different. It's not really happening with kindergarten and elementary and all of that stuff. So what would you say to someone that says that?
So we are frequently accused of book banning.
Okay.
To answer your question, again, it's my decision as a parent. It should be every parent's decision as to what sort of material. So some parents may be fine with that. I had the opportunity to read the book ahead of time. Most parents don't have that opportunity. Either they, are too busy, or to be honest, some parents don't have the capacity to read the books. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be informed as to the type of content that their children are being exposed to. And ultimately, it should be a parent's decision, not a teacher's decision, not a school district's decision as to what you want to teach your child. This book, we were speaking before, I'm an observant Jewish woman. I know that premarital sex has an effect on a child's psyche, and again, it just goes back to a parent's right.
Sure.
I should be able. This book promoted not just premarital, but teenagers. The girl in the book was 14 years old. So and her grandmother was not home, and she snuck a boy into her grandmother's home to have sex with him. And that wasn't something that I wanted my daughter reading. But that was kind of a mild version of what's in schools. And I have examples that I appeared.
I see you have the binder there, and I'm like, I'm
You're nervous because I may or may not. I appeared on Jesse Waters because I uncovered This Book is Gay. Was in a 7th grade classroom in Collinswood Middle School. So we're talking about a 12-year-old found a book called This Book is Gay on his teacher's desk. And so when I was on Fox News, we couldn't even read excerpts from the book. It is a graphic novel, and I have it, I'll show it to you. I couldn't even show it on Fox News because that's how explicit it is.
So it's not appropriate for broadcasting. Why on earth would it be appropriate for elementary school?
I was, what do you call it, like suspended on Facebook because I posted the image that's in the book. They told me that I violated community standards. One of the school board members in CMS objects to anyone emailing her the quotes because she doesn't want that in her email. And the point is, if the school board member doesn't even want it, if I can't put a picture on Facebook, if I can't speak about it, I've been on radio stations and I can't read the quotes because it violates FCC.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's for you.
Let's look at it. Let's look at it. Let's read it.
Yeah.
Because we're not big media, and I'm not going to censor this type of stuff. But do you know if these books have been required readings, or are they just in the library? Because that was a recent one where an 11-year-old found a book in a library, and the father made him come and read it at one of the school meetings, which was pretty explicit. Now we could talk about if it was correct to have the father to make the 11-year-old read it in public. Instead of reading it himself.
There are many examples.
That's an excuse I hear a lot, where it's like, oh, it's in the library, but you don't have to check the book out.
There are many examples. So in my daughter's case, it was required reading.
Okay.
There was a case in the last 2 months where 6 teachers issued a TikTok challenge to the entire high school to read books that were listed on the American Libraries Association banned books, and it was in honor of Right to Read Day. I have all of those books here too. very explicit graphic. And so the people that we're here with, this is how I met them. I met Chad and Wendy Hawley because their son was one of the ones that was issued this challenge, and they were absolutely infuriated. And so Chad went to a school board meeting and read quotes from one of the books. And it's absolutely shocking. So there are examples when it's required reading, when it's suggested reading, when it's, I just told you, sitting on a teacher's desk, or when it's in a teacher's personal library, and also when it's in the school library. Right. And the point is that they have unrestricted access to these books. And so part of what I'm doing is advocating for a new system to rate books objectively, where it receives a rating and a parent can opt into a system to allow their children access to a certain rating.
Okay.
So that they don't have unrestricted access to the books anymore.
It's kind of funny, actually, you're mentioning it, that the books don't have ratings when video games and movies and TV shows all have ratings on what's considered appropriate.
I'm so glad that you recognize that, and that's a point that I make.
Books don't have that at all.
No, books have, it'll just say young adult, or something like that. It gives you no idea of what is actually in the book, and so that's what we're advocating for: a rating that tells you. When you are watching TV or you go to a movie, the rating comes up and it tells you nudity, violence. It tells you exactly what's in the book. And so we've proposed a system that rates a book from a 0 to a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And I'm advocating for the 4s and the 5s to be placed in limited access. So we're accused of book banning all of the time. I'm not even advocating that the books be removed from the school library. Now, some of the books that I've pointed out to the Charlotte Mecklenburg school system superintendent, she has voluntarily pulled them out, not because I asked, because I didn't, but she made the decision once she saw this book is gay. Once she saw this book is gay, she pulled the book herself. There's another book, Let's Talk About It.
We have someone showing us some images.
She pulled, yeah, there you go.
Oh my gosh.
These are, I have that here.
Yeah.
Good grief.
These are images.
Here you go.
Yeah. So I don't know whether you want to read it or not.
Yeah, you come in and take it. Oh man.
Yeah, so that's why I walk around with this binder and with book reports, because people think that that we're banning books like To Kill a Mockingbird,
right.
or
the Anne Frank journal, because I know that in the middle section she gets fairly exploratory as she hits puberty as well.
So speaking of the Anne Frank graphic novel now, that was only published after her father's death. Her father made the decision that he did not want those sections of the diary included, and so it wasn't
for the diary in general, or for the graphic novel.
He died before the graphic novel was published, and so that's the only,
probably against his wishes. Then
totally against his wishes. It was the board of her foundation made the decision only after her father died, because her father did not want those sections included. So anyway, but I was making the point. I have not. It's not To Kill a Mockingbird or the Anne Frank diary that we're advocating against. So I walk around with this because that's what we're accused of, and I show people, just like the reaction that you had. I've never had a single person that didn't react that way. People are not aware of the explicitness of the content that is in schools, and when they do become aware, they come over to this side.
Yeah, they might as well just set the kids up with OnlyFans accounts.
No, well, yes, it is straight up pornography. And I also like to make the point that the computers, the Chromebooks that are issued by CMS are restricted. They can't go to pornography sites or OnlyFans or things like that, but they have unfettered access in the school library to material like that.
That's just insane.
Yep. I was gonna say, I kind of want to, because we don't like to shy away from the
Reading?
topics here. Yeah, because we want to know what is actually happening. What's going
I need
on
my glasses.
here.
Can you grab my glasses? They're on the table.
Listen, this is how you do podcasts live on the road. This is how we do it today. Thank you, kind sir. You're the real VIP today.
This is what we weren't allowed to read on.
Which book was this?
This book is gay.
This book is gay.
Another point I want to make is we don't just, we're accused all the time of being anti-LGBT, and that is not, I advocate against sexuality, whether it's homosexual or heterosexual. And some of the books have been LGBT, and some of them have been talked. The rape scene that I objected to in the book my daughter was required to read was heterosexual. So that's a false narrative that's painted about us. Let's see. Perhaps the most important skill you will master as a gay man is the timeless classic, the hand job. You can practice on yourself. The bad news is the page is folded. Used to have his own way of getting himself off. Learning how to find a partner's personal style can take time, but it can also be very rewarding. It goes down. A bad handy is grasping a penis and shaking it like a ketchup bottle. Finally, my misunderstanding about rubbing two penises together wasn't far off the mark. Rubbing them together in the hand feels awesome. Mega combo handy.
Hang on. This was for 7th grade?
A 7th grader found this book on his teacher's desk. Yeah. One of the books in the TikTok challenge.
Oh, what the heck? That is so gross.
It just doesn't belong there.
No.
Oh, that got loud in there.
Whoever's in charge of the audio.
I just think what's weird is that like you can get in trouble for having a Bible there, but then you have a book called this, like in big letters, like this book is gay with like such explicit material. That to me doesn't make sense.
Yeah. No.
So their narrative about censoring and book banning actually works against them. Yes, because they don't allow the Bible. They don't allow the Bible, but they allow stuff like this. Well, anyway, there are
Give us one more.
Okay.
One more.
Let's
I just
see.
feel like we saw some. Thankfully, we're not putting the visuals. on there.
I'm
That's
trying
too
to find
disgusting,
an
but
example of heterosexual.
Yeah. No, it definitely does happen.
I moved on him. Lightning lashed through my veins, and my focus narrowed to his fingers, his mouth, his body on mine. His palm pushed against the bundle of nerves at the apex of my thighs, and I groaned his name as I shattered. My head thrown back, I gulped down night, cool air, and then I was being lowered to the bed, gently, delicately, lovingly. It goes on. I begged. He palmed my breast, his thumb flicking over my nipple. I cried out, and he buried himself in me with a mighty stroke. And it continues to go on.
And what grade is this one?
This book is called A Court of Mist and Fury. I've located it in CMS middle schools and high schools.
Yeah, that's crazy. So this is obviously a big problem, and again, reading it isn't just for the sake of being like, but it's really just to make this real. And so tell us what you guys are really doing here, because I know you guys are making a difference in the school system. Tell us some of the rewards that you guys have gotten from the work that you've done.
Well, one of the things that we do is, and it's part of our mission, is bringing awareness to the issue. And the more people that become aware, It can't just be Brooke Weiss showing up at a school board meeting and sending emails. So when we get people like Chad and Wendy involved and they become aware and send emails, then change starts to happen. And so here in Charlotte Mecklenburg, one of the things that has happened is they are in the process of creating a new book review process. And so currently it happens at the school level. They are now taking it to the district level, so that once a decision is made on a particular book, it applies across the board to all of the schools, instead of the way it is now where a committee within the school reviews the book and makes a decision that only applies to that school.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I think you made a great point when you first started about people getting involved, where I think sometimes we see this happening on such a national level and it feels overwhelming. Like, you see so many different articles about this happening, but there are ways for people to get involved. I think one of them is showing up to school board. What are some other ways that people can get involved in a local manner that's not going to be, super overwhelming? What's something that they can do?
They can email their own teachers and principals. And in CMS, the district is divided into learning communities. So I always encourage parents to not just to jump to the school board, but kind of follow, a hierarchy and start with the teacher. And then if you don't get the result you want, then loop in the principal. And then if you don't get the result you want, loop in the that learning communities, whatever the title is there. And then if you have to, go all the way up to the superintendent and the school board. I think it's always important to loop in the school board and whatever there are 6 districts, and whichever of the 6 districts is school board member represents you. There are things that you can do at the local level, but there are also things that you can do at the state level. And so we have a North Carolina legislative team now. I'm the vice chair of the legislative team, and we are lobbying for lots of legislation right now. One is a parental bill of rights that defines and codifies a parent's right to make decisions regarding their children's education. We're also working with legislators to get a Protect Women's Sports Act passed. So there was a young lady here in North Carolina, her name was Peyton McNabb, high schooler, volleyball player, and while she was competing, there was a transgender on the other team who spiked the ball, hitting her in the head, knocking her unconscious. She ended up with a concussion, and this happened last fall. She is still experiencing side effects from what happened to her. So we had a legislative day a month ago, and she was one of our guest speakers. But having boys play against girls, there are significant biological differences, and it's just a fact that males have a physical advantage over females, and women are erased erased in sports. You hear about stories all the time in high school, in college, and there was, even in national competitions. The other side likes to say that they don't have an advantage, but all that you hear about are the times when they win and they beat a female. If they weren't an advantage, then I feel like the people on the left would be talking about examples where the boys didn't win. The point is, they don't have those examples to point to. They don't have those examples to talk about. And for most people, and the majority of the people do not support transgenders, boys playing against girls. There is a minority that is very loud, that is advocating for that, but if you talk to average Americans, I don't care what your political background is, most people have common sense and recognize that this is a problem. And so that's something that we're working on at the state level.
Well, I want to say something to that, because you're right. You do have a lot of people that are against this, but I think what stops them is that loud majority. They're scared. And so, what you're doing is important, where you're getting out there and you're saying something. But you're right, it can't just be you. And so
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
People are scared because there is significant pushback, backlash on people like me. that do step forward and do say something. I am labeled here in Charlotte as a bigot, as a homophobe. I'm frequently called a Christo-fascist. Our organization, Moms for Liberty, 2 weeks ago was placed on the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate map. We know about that organization. They've been attacking Christians for a long time and have been mostly discredited. Their founder was accused by his own employees of sexual harassment and as being a racist. But anyway, we're on that. We're placed on their hate map. So a lot of people, we've been in the national news, all over the national news for the last 2 weeks. And I know in this community that people have sent emails. I'm actually a substitute teacher for CMS. I've been substitute teaching for 5 years. People didn't know that until this last year, but a lot of people now are writing in to the school and to the board members calling for my termination. I also think that it's possible that in the future they'll use things like that against me to prevent me from entering CMS buildings. So yeah, people have a right to be afraid. The DOJ labeled parents speaking at school board meetings as domestic terrorists and came after parents. So yes, there is a significant backlash against people that step forward, and people are afraid. But we're at the point now where you must make a decision to stand up for what is right, because some of the gender ideology and things that are happening to children in America right now is unacceptable, and it's leading to a very dark place. The social transitioning begins in school, but then it moves, into medical transitioning. And there's a clinic here in Charlotte that used to have pictures on her website. She's taken them down now, but she will perform a double mastectomy. She had a picture on her website of a female that she had performed a double mastectomy on. The girl was 14 years old. So if you don't stand up now and talk about this, it's being normalized. Even the Biden administration, in honor of Pride Week, came out and said, that we love you, we accept you. He is trying to have legislation passed that in California, for example, children will be taken away from parents that do not affirm their children if they want to transition. So there was a U.S., maybe, I don't remember what position he was in, but actually told people in California, for parents, you need to flee. You need to get out of the state of California because they will take your children. Mm-hmm. They will take them.
Canada is already doing that.
They're already doing
it
that
for well over a year at this point. Yeah. Where if you don't go along with whatever your child wants to be, then they'll remove him.
And typically things happen in Canada, then they go into California, and then then the whole United States. Yeah. But they're trying to normalize it. They're trying to normalize it right now. Biden also said when he was giving that speech at the Pride event at the White House that these children are our children.
Yep.
Okay? And no, they're not. No, they are not. We are not a socialist or a communist country. The children do not belong to the government. They belong to parents. They are not our collective children. Mm-hmm. My children are mine.
Yep. Yeah, no, there was a lot of things that came out of that White House one, but first and foremost, I think probably that comment from the president, and then
that's the president of the United States saying
that. The LGBT flag being flown front and center in front of the American flags, and then all the different people flashing their boobs or their lack of boobs, all out on the front.
There was a female that had a mastectomy showing her scars, and then there was a male showing his fake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
But let's talk about that for a second.
House lawn.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So I think that the LGBT community, over the decades, there's no denying, has made tremendous strides, and most Americans have absolutely no problem with that community. I never had a problem until children started being targeted, and so the T part of that alphabet soup has really twisted, and so Pride is not what it used to be, and they're getting a backlash now and taking that community backwards. So just like we talk about I encourage parents to step forward. I encourage my gay friends to come out and step forward, because in that community also, most of them, the majority of them, are against the medical transition of children, are against the hormones and against the puberty blockers. They also receive tremendous backlash when they speak out against that now. But they've got to do it, because their whole community...
They'll get exiled like any conservative that happens to be black.
Their
and
whole
doesn't
community,
vote blue.
their whole community, it is under attack now because of the trans lunacy, I call it.
Well, don't they have the gay against groomers?
Yeah,
group?
she's actually going to be, Michelle, she's going to be at our national summit in 2 weeks.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Where's that going to be at?
It's in Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. All right.
Oh, you want me to take the mic back? All right, you have given us so much here. We were like, oh, we're going to sit down with you for
We didn't
10
even
minutes.
talk about academics.
Oh, no, oh my gosh. I would keep you forever if you just keep talking to us.
Let me just give you one statistic.
Okay, I'm ready.
2 statistics. 2. Nationally, 1/3 of American 4th graders read at a proficient level. So when people talk about the failing public school system, think about that.
Yeah.
2/3 of children cannot read at the 4th grade, and 3rd grade is a benchmark year. If you cannot read by the 3rd grade, then statistically you will be functionally illiterate the rest of your life, and when you graduate, you will not be college or career ready. So that's the national statistic, 1/3. Here in Charlotte, 9% of 4th graders read at a proficient level. That should shock everyone.
That's insane.
Ooh.
And that's just, is it not a...
No. I was going to ask, is that a pre or post-pandemic statistic?
It's kind of both. It's post-pandemic, but in this last year, children made strides, recovered somewhat from...
Okay.
They were failing prior to COVID, maybe failing a little bit better, but they were still below the national average.
Gotcha. Okay.
I feel like we're doing a great job sharing this mic here. I don't know, it's doing good. But no, with what you said there, it blows my mind, because we have the left that is so focused on sexualizing the children, and I am in agreement with you. You're a practicing Jew, I'm a Christian. We both kind of agree. It's like we don't want any sort of like sexually immoral stuff, in the school system.
There's purpose to it.
Right.
The sexualization of children is one of the most effective ways to destabilize a child. If a 5-year-old cannot even figure out whether they are a boy or a girl, then they will never develop a secure identity, and so they're much easier to indoctrinate.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is the whole goal, is that the government, it's Biden, he's a horrible guy, but at least he says the truth. He wants them to be our kids. That's he's
They're
saying
open
the
about
quiet
it.
part out loud. At least
Yes,
he's
he is.
being honest. And that's what they're trying to do. You're absolutely right. And so that's why they're not focused on academics, because if they were focused on academics, you'd actually have to teach them how to use
Critical
their
thinkers.
smarts. Yes, critical thinking,
To read.
basic math, basic factual history.
If you see a middle schooler or a young person in the grocery store and you feel comfortable, ask them what 8 times 7 is.
Yeah.
I promise you, ask them what 8 times 7 is, and they will not right away give you an answer. And if they do give you an answer, chances are it's going to be wrong. I challenge you to do that.
Yeah, and that's insane, and it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
And you could go into, and we've talked to so many different people about the education system and what's going on there, and there's also we could literally do this for like hours, but you can go into the whole family structure, the idea of the nuclear family being broken down. That's part of what you do with, the sexualization of children, and also just sexualization from the top up, even with adults, and telling them you can sleep with whoever you want, you can do whatever you want, and as a result, they break down the entire family.
It's been part of the moral decline of the United States.
I would 100% agree with that.
The loss of modesty. There was a time when we didn't talk about sex. I would never have asked a person what their sexual orientation is. And now people just volunteer it. Like, it's almost like you have to do that. And there was a time that these books, not even so long ago, it would be outrageous to think that those would be in school. But the moral decline of the United States has been happening for a long time, and it's the loss of religion. It's taking God out, out of schools, out of families.
Yeah, when you become a secular culture where when you have people that, the first thing they introduce is their sexual identity, it's become somewhat of a key essential part of their identity that they feel they cannot be without.
But I tell people all the
idol.
time, there's so much more to a person than that. Like, that's one of the least interesting things about a person is their sexual orientation. Like, that just shouldn't be a critical part. The other thing that I think is maybe happening, children rebel. That's part of growing up, establishing independence. But what can kids do anymore? All the adults have tattoos. They've all, done drugs.
Yeah.
In some places, drugs are legal. So what can they do? And I think that that's a little part of it. And then I also think it's a social contagion.
Oh yeah, and I know there's a book. Oh, what's her name?
Abigail Schreier.
Abigail Schreier. Yeah.
Irreversible Damage.
Yeah, it's
she was canceled.
Yeah, for sure.
I tell people, if you have children, especially daughters, you must read that book. You must.
Yeah.
Abigail Schreier, Irreversible Damage.
I haven't read. I've only watched her interview with Jordan Peterson. I've seen her some other things. And she's not even this is what's so interesting about this movement is that you have people that I wouldn't necessarily describe Abigail Schreier as
she's liberal,
a conservative.
No, absolutely not.
She's just
she's Jewish too, which Jewish people in the United States tend to lean to the left. And yes, she is not a conservative by any means.
Yeah, but she's out here saying,
she's looked at the data.
Yeah, and it's just undeniable to her that there's a level of social contagion, and it makes sense if you know any young girls. What young girls do, and I think is what she talked about, which makes sense, is if one of them starts cutting, more of them will start cutting, or if one of them has an eating disorder.
I have 3 daughters.
Yeah, so you know.
My daughters are older now. We've been through it.
Yeah,
we've been through it.
And even if you are an adult, when women come to talk, what do? They talk about some of the problems that they have, and they bond over the pain, and they kind of come together. That's just the way I think women are wired. And so when you have a teenager, and you know this, you have daughters, they just grab onto things.
Girls in particular, in middle school, they must declare themselves something, especially white girls. They have to be part of some marginalized community. Yeah. Otherwise, they're part of the, they're targeted as privileged, white privilege. They're targeted. So they have to place themselves into some sort of marginalized community, and one of the only things that they can do is declare themselves bisexual or homosexual or transgender. Right. And so that's part of where it's coming from. Right.
And it used to be, at least when I was growing up, and I'm not that old, by the way, I'm very young, and this is what's scary, though, and I tell people this, I'm 25, all right? So it's been about 10 years since I've been in high school, and the most I remember was being emo, and
yeah, it didn't happen.
Those were, 2 of the ones, and now it's we have girls that, this is something we deal with in our youth groups.
They're wearing binders. The schools
they're questioning their sexual. I'm this was never, you never questioned whether you were a boy.
It's happened very quickly.
Yeah.
It's happened very quickly.
It's insane. I don't know what to do with it. You've given us a lot to chew on today.
And I hope that people will do some research now. There's a very easy way to figure out whether these books are in your child's school. Follett has a website, destinydiscovery.com, and you can search by state and then district and then by school. Or state, county, and school, and then it brings you to a page where you can search by title or by author, and it's an online card catalog. So all the schools use it, and you can figure out whether these books are at your child's school. So I tell people to do that. There's also a book website called Book Looks, and that's where these book reports came from.
Wow. Yeah, and we'll make sure when we post this to put all these links in our YouTube description, so it's super easy for people to find them, because It doesn't have to be this difficult.
No.
You should be able to find them easily. You've given
The schools
us those
won't tell you.
resources.
There's a lack of transparency with the schools,
But we're glad that you're being transparent with us and reading to us some of this material, showing us some of this material, just being honest with us.
thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to come over to our table, which glorious as it is, but we genuinely appreciate it.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work, and we will make sure that everyone has these resources, whoever views our videos.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.